Good afternoon, church. I hope that you're doing well. It's a beautiful day outside. We had some great rain this morning. It may not have been enough, but we're thankful for every drop. Today is Holy Thursday, or as it's more commonly known in a liturgical year, Maundy Thursday, which usually comes from John chapter 13, where Jesus says, what we talked about yesterday, a new commandment I give to you. That's what sort of Maundy kind of means. Comes from the Latin word for mandate, so command Thursday. We're not going to talk about the foot washing because we kind of talked about that yesterday. However, today is a day for serious reflection as Christians, because it's the day that Jesus celebrated the Passover feast with his disciples, and that tonight is the time when Judas betrayed Jesus. In the morning, early in the morning, will be when Jesus went through his trial by the Sanhedrin and was condemned by them, and then handed over to Pilate for examination there. And so tomorrow we'll be reflecting upon his crucifixion and his death. But today I want to think about we're still looking towards his crucifixion and ultimately his resurrection. Today I want to I'm going to read from Mark chapter 14, and I'm going to read from verse 12 to 25. On the first day of unleavened bread, when the Passover lamb was sacrificed, his disciples said to him, "Where do you want us to go and make the preparations for you to eat the Passover?" So he sent two of his disciples, saying to them, "Go into the city, and you will meet a man carrying a pitcher of water. Follow him and say to the owner of the house which he enters, 'The master says, Where is my dining room in which I can eat the Passover with my disciples?' He will show you a large upper room furnished with couches, all prepared. Make the preparations for us there." The disciples set out and went into the city and found everything as he told them, and prepared the Passover. When evening came, he arrived with the 12, and while they were at the table eating, Jesus said, "I tell you solemnly, one of you is about to betray me, one of you eating with me." They were distressed and asked him one after another, "Not I, surely?" He said to them, "It is one of the 12, one who is dipping into the same dish with me. Yes, the Son of Man is going to his fate as the Scriptures say he will. But alas for that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. Better for that man if he had never been born." And as they were eating, he took some bread, and when he had said the blessing, he broke it and gave it to them. "Take it," he said. "This is my body." Then he took a cup, and when he had returned thanks, he gave it to them, and all drank from it. And he said to them, "This is my blood, the blood of the covenant, which is to be poured out for many. I tell you solemnly, I shall not drink any more wine until the day I drink the new wine in the kingdom of God." So, this story has as its backdrop the impending crucifixion, condemnation and crucifixion of Jesus. And it's not a celebratory feast in some ways. It's very solemn for Jesus. After this, he goes to the Mount of Olives, to the Garden of Gethsemane, where he spends several hours in prayer. And in Luke, is described as his sweat becoming as drops of blood. But I want to focus on, for a devotional today, how Jesus speaks about the Eucharist, or how he speaks about communion, and how he thinks about this sacrifice, which this meal is symbolizing. He says, "Take it, this is my body." And then he took a cup, and when he had returned thanks, he gave it to them, and all drank from it. And he said to them, "This is my blood, the blood of the covenant, which is to be poured out for many." The language I want to focus on here is the word covenant. That Jesus imagines his sacrifice as being directly tied to God's covenant with the people, and in particular with the covenant with Israel, but in regards to us, God's new covenant with Gentiles as well. That the sacrifice of Jesus, it was covenantal in nature. It wasn't just a death, but that through Jesus, God was doing something. And this ties us all the way back to the Old Testament, to God making a covenant with Abraham. And what's interesting about the covenants with Abraham is that Abraham is not all that involved. If you remember in Genesis 12, I think it's maybe chapter 15, God puts Abraham to sleep. And while he's asleep, these animals are divided into separate halves. And God, this theophany, this appearance of God, is this sort of burning pot, I guess, this big, what is it called? I can't remember the name of it, but a big pot in which you would sort of use as an oven of sorts. And it goes between the halves of these animals, which essentially means that with the usually it was usually the person who was making the covenant, who was needing the covenant, that would go between the halves, which would say, if I don't keep this covenant, if I am unfaithful to the terms of this covenant, this agreement, this contract that we're making, may you do to me what has been done to these animals that are cut in half here. And God was walking between the halves. God wasn't making Abraham walk between the halves. And that's important, because what God was saying was, may this happen to me if I prove to be unfaithful to the promise that I've made to you, Abraham. And over again, we see God as proving to be merciful and forgiving towards Israel on the terms of the covenant. Because over and over again, Israel proves to be unfaithful to the covenant. And over in our lives, we have proven to be unfaithful to God. And so what Jesus says here, when he says, this is the blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many, what Jesus is saying, that God is continuing to be faithful through me. This is how God is going to maintain our relationship. That despite humanity's faithlessness or infidelity, God has proven to be faithful. He is keeping his promises. He refuses to let humanity go. He refuses to let us go to the fate that we choose towards self-destruction. But instead, he takes the penalty upon himself. He proves to be faithful, even when we're unfaithful. And that has so many implications for our relationships, that for the relationships with other people, with friends, with family members, with spouses. My uncle who did Claire in my wedding, this was something that he pointed out and that continues to stick with me. That the nature of a covenant relationship is that even when the other partner in that covenant proves to be unfaithful, I'm committed to being faithful despite it. That is the example that God has given us. And so, as far as Maundy Thursday goes, in John, Jesus, after washing their feet, which happens on Wednesday in John, after washing their feet, Jesus says, a new commandment I give to you. Love one another as I have loved you. Love one another. So there's today and tomorrow, I hope that you'll dedicate some time to seriously reflect on what happened 2,020 years ago. That God became human out of his love for us. And he didn't leave us to our own self-destructive ways, but he looked at us and he remained faithful to his promises. And out of his desire for relationship with us and his unwillingness to let us go, he became the sacrifice to maintain that relationship. God bless you.